What's up guys, Everything Apple Pro here, and let me introduce you to the brand new iPad mini 4. This was such a subtle release. Apple didn't make very much noise about it, and yet when I received it, I realized this thing is a much bigger deal than it seems. It's newer, faster, sleeker, lighter, and better in almost every single way than the iPad mini 3. So in this video, I'm going to be covering everything about this device and letting you guys know whether or not it's worth the buy. Now, if I were Apple, I would have named this the iPad Air Mini. All this is a downsized iPad Air 2. Now it's almost similar in every single way to it. It's just as thin, 6.1 millimeters, which is 18% thinner than the old iPad mini 3. Now I gotta give credit where it's due. Apple did a great job with this device. The display is now laminated together with the LCD, so that allows the device to be thinner while maintaining a sharper clarity. This device is vibrant. It just pops. When you compare it to the iPad mini 3, that one is dull and lifeless. Not only is the display more beautiful, it's also coated in an anti-reflective coating. So this is it, and this is the iPad mini 3. Notice how you can see more reflected into your face, especially light. It's more muted on the iPad mini 4. Oh, and did I mention it's thinner? I just can't get over how thin and small this is. It's hard to believe Apple packed so much into such a thin frame. 6.1 millimeters. And that display, guys, it is beautiful. So let's go ahead and jump into the internals. So exterior-wise, like I said, it has changed. It's very beautiful, but most of the changes are on the inside. Now it's been updated with a new A8 chip, slightly overclocked. It's the same one used in the iPhone 6 and 6 Plus. However, of course, the iPad mini has so much more pixels to push, and Apple added just a little bit more power to the iPad mini 4. So 1.5 gigahertz, whereas on the iPhone 6, the same chip is at 1.4. However, the big change here is 2 gigabytes of RAM. It allows you to do true multitasking. This is the second iPad besides the iPad Air 2 that can handle split screen multitasking and picture-in-picture video at the same time. I mean, this thing is wicked powerful. 2 gigabytes of RAM is a big deal on an iOS device. I mean, almost every single device has had 1 gig or less ever since now, and 2 gigs is just starting to make its way to Apple devices. And I gotta tell you, going from a Mini 3 to a Mini 4, the change is 100% apparent. Everything is faster. It's not as buggy. It doesn't stutter. I mean, it's just fluid. It's as if iOS 9 was built with 2 gigabytes of RAM in mind, and every other device is suffering because it doesn't have 2 gigs of RAM. So say you're watching a video and you need to go do something else. You need to go browse the internet or run a different application. Well, just take this little picture-in-picture video, move it anywhere where you please, and go about your business. It was once exclusive to the iPad Air 2. Now the Mini 4 has it, and I gotta say, on a smaller screen, this is probably my favorite iPad. All of these new features are awesome. Now, not only can you do this, I mean, picture-in-picture is great, but you can go ahead and multitask while running the picture-in-picture, and it still works so great. Now, this is obviously influenced by a lot of the jailbreak features in Android, but it's so good to have, and Apple does it so well. It's very well optimized with the 2 gigs of RAM and the smaller screen size, so definitely props to Apple. Now, I'll get into the actual numbers in just a second, but if you buy iPads to game, you will not be disappointed with the iPad mini 4. It runs beautifully, 60 frames per second, most games, and I had no issues whatsoever. Even though the processing power isn't on par with the iPad Air 2, it's not an A8X, it's just the A8, so remember it's dual core 1.5 gigahertz. It still does a wonderful job because there's less pixels to push. I mean, the iPad Air 2 has a larger display, so it makes sense that it would need a little bit more power. This one makes do with what it has, and again, I gotta say, the 2 gigabytes of RAM just shines. It's about damn time that Apple introduced that to their devices. So here's what the Mini 4 is packing, and here's how it does on the Geekbench scale. And this is running the newest iOS 9, of course, and it does very great. This is just slightly above, I'd say about a 10 to 15% increase above the A8. And this is considering it has a larger display, so this thing does surprisingly well, and I can't see this thing being outdated for a while. It's going to be running iOS 10 and 11, and it'll do so wonderfully because of the 2 gigabytes of RAM. Now, of course, all of these new features require power, yet I was disappointed to find that that Apple actually downgraded the mAh capacity of the battery from the iPad mini 3. And of course, this is necessary in order to accommodate for that smaller, thinner design. Yeah, it was disappointing to learn. However, Apple is saying that the battery life will not change. It will stay the same, which is great considering this thing is much more powerful. So what do we have so far? A slightly better display, a thinner design, and a much more powerful device. Yet there is so much more to the iPad mini 4. Now, starting with the speakers. Gotta say, I was impressed. The speakers are so rich and full. I mean, the actual design of the grills changed, but they're still stereo speakers, yet it's a more deeper, more pronounced sound. And I was very happy to learn that because I watch a lot of content on my iPads, and the better the speakers, the better it is. So thank you, Apple, for updating the speakers. I hope they do the same to the iPhone 6s. So that brings me to cameras. You now have an 8 megapixel sensor and a repositioned microphone system. So instead of them being directly in the back where they could easily be muffled by cases, Apple relocated them, brought them closer to the camera, which will probably make audio recording during video a lot better. There's a new shutter mode, so you can hold that and instantly clog up your 16 gigabyte of memory with a ton of photos. It's safe to assume the sensor is taken from the iPhone 6. It's the same 8 megapixel and all the same specifications. Now, I still think you're a dork if you take pictures with an iPad, but the Mini 4 makes it a little bit more acceptable to do so. Now, the iPad cameras have always been the runt of the litter. Apple always puts the worst megapixel cameras in them, even though people use them to take pictures so often. And it's a shame they don't have optical image stabilization, but otherwise, I was very satisfied, even surprised. The vibrance was on par with the iPhone 6. It was an all-around great camera, and I wish it did have better stability, but overall, it takes fantastic pictures, and if you're going to use it as a camera, it's going to be a damn good one. So color me impressed. The iPad mini 4 has a fantastic back camera. Now, front camera remains at 1.2 megapixels, 720p. Yeah, the photos weren't terrible. It just, nothing special about them. Take a look. I mean, it has a front-facing camera and it can take pictures and videos. Nothing beyond that is too special. It doesn't do great at all at low light, so this is just a daylight camera. So what else? Well, I like the fact that in the browser, the overhang from having such a small bezel, it doesn't actually interfere if you keep your finger on the display with your usability. And just a couple other tidbits. So I just wanted to mention this thing is lighter, meaning it's easier to hold, especially if you're going to be using this thing as an e-reader. So if you like to read comics or books, this thing is probably going to be better than a Mini 3, and the old cases won't work with it. So if you have an old one from your Mini 3, it will no longer be compatible. The silent switch has been removed altogether, so instead just volume rockers. And it's 2015. And we still don't have a calculator app on our iPads. I don't care about the other apps Apple didn't include. A calculator makes perfect sense on an iPad. It's a device you're going to be taking to school, to your job. You need a calculator, and I don't want to install them from a third party. Please, Apple. iOS 10 maybe iOS 11, you'll introduce it. Anyways, besides that, this is a great device, and I'm glad Apple has made so many updates to the iPad mini. It was neglected in the third generation. All Apple did was add a Touch ID sensor to it and rebranded it to the iPad mini 3. So the iPad mini 4 is the biggest change since the original iPad mini. Is it worth buying? Absolutely. I mean, this thing is powerful. It's light. It's got great battery life and a great display. So there's really no reason not to buy it. Well, what if you already have an iPad mini 3 or iPad mini 2? Is it worth updating then? Well, be sure to check out my comparison video. I'll be uploading it here in just a minute. And thanks for watching this video, guys. I had fun making this video. It's really great learning about these new products, and I'm very happy that Apple has made some great changes to their iPad mini lineup. Be sure to check out any more of my videos, and if you enjoyed this video, please give me a like. It does help me out. Subscribe for more great videos, and I'll have that comparison up in just a minute. Peace.